Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you want to understand how the massive, sprawling global humanitarian system actually functions, how a high-level policy conversation in Geneva literally translates into life-saving practice in the middle of a war zone, you have to understand this specific role. Today, we're decoding the strategic blueprint of what is arguably one of the most complex, high-stakes leadership positions inside the United Nations. We're talking about the D2 Director of OCHA's Humanitarian Sector Division. We're going to deconstruct exactly what it takes to sit at the absolute nerve center of this global coordination architecture.
So diving right into our source material for today, there's this really compelling core thesis that keeps coming up. It basically argues that you just cannot understand a senior humanitarian role by looking at a rigid, boring list of duties on a job description. The real test, the ultimate test of a director, is their ability to convert authority into impact and then turn that impact into institutional trust. It completely elevates the gig from a standard management job into this profound leadership philosophy. We aren't just talking about pushing papers around at headquarters here. We're talking about saving lives by building a system that people actually believe in.
To unpack the anatomy of this leader, we've broken the blueprint down into 5 key areas. We're going to cover the humanitarian reset, field-focused coordination, diplomacy and principled access, leading a dispersed workforce, and finally, converting authority into impact.
All right, part 1. Let's look at the humanitarian reset and how this role shapes the global system. The big anchor term you need to know here is the humanitarian reset. The source defines this as a system-shaping mandate to make OCHA's global humanitarian coordination architecture way more streamlined, integrated, and genuinely fit for purpose. This means deliberately moving away from all that tangled headquarters complexity. Imagine you're a field worker, right? And you're waiting weeks for a policy decision to clear multiple desks in Geneva while a crisis is literally worsening by the hour. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of bureaucratic bottleneck this reset is trying to completely eliminate. The whole system has to reorganize itself around the people in need, rather than demanding the field adapt to rigid global structures. It's a total flip of the traditional top-down hierarchy. Now, historically, massive organizations tend to fall into the trap of building these separate professional islands. You might have brilliant policy experts who are completely disconnected from the folks actually handling ground negotiations. But the reset demands integrated delivery. The director is overseeing coordination, policy, negotiation, information streams, and these just can't operate in silos anymore. They have to fuse together around emerging crises. Basically, it means field operations get support that is clearer, way faster, and incredibly practical, drawing from all these different expertise streams at the exact same time. Which brings us to part 2, field-focused coordination, serving as the bridge to reality. To pull that integration off, you have to look at the sheer scale of the stakeholder ecosystem this director is dealing with. It is honestly staggering. On one hand, they're giving direct advisory support to the absolute highest levels of UN leadership, like the Undersecretary General. On the other hand, they are driving interagency alignment with huge UN entities, all while engaging with external partners. We're talking powerful member states, major donors, local NGOs. They have to walk into diplomatic, technical, and political rooms and seamlessly translate the needs of one group to another, often literally on the exact same day. That's why the role is essentially defined by its ability to act as a crucial bridge between super high-level global policy and gritty, on-the-ground field realities. Because think about it, a global mandate that's too rigid is just going to snap in a chaotic field context. But a local approach that's too fragmented won't give you the system-wide efficiency you need for a massive global response. This leader makes sure that every single decision made in a cozy boardroom is deeply anchored in the actual express needs of the people affected by the crisis.
Okay, moving to part 3. Let's talk about diplomacy and principled access and navigating some really intense geopolitics.
Outside the walls of internal UN coordination, the director is navigating an absolute geopolitical minefield. In highly volatile environments, humanitarian space has to be fiercely protected, and that protection is grounded in 4 non-negotiable principles: humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. And look, the director can't treat these like fluffy academic concepts from a textbook. They are highly dynamic, practical tools. They are the exact leverage that lets humanitarian actors cross a heavily armed front line without taking sides. It's what gives them permission to reach desperate populations safely. Without these 4 principles, humanitarian work just becomes another political pawn.
So managing this requires a profound level of political sensitivity, but, and this is key, without political compromise. Humanitarian diplomacy is this highly disciplined leadership practice. The director needs the analytical chops to read the geopolitical chessboard and the judgment to navigate massive risks. They're engaging with really powerful, sometimes highly controversial actors to secure access, but they can never abandon those core values. It is a delicate, high-wire act where a misstep is literally measured in human lives.
Let's move into Part 4, Leading a Dispersed Workforce. This is all about the human element.
You can't execute that high-wire diplomacy without a massive human engine behind the scenes. And the leadership behaviors required here are full of these fascinating, tricky contrasts. The director has to provide clear direction, right? But without micromanaging or creating a bottleneck. They need to delegate authority, but without losing ultimate accountability. They have to encourage their staff to take bold initiative on the ground without weakening the organization's standards. And perhaps the most absolutely crucial piece, fostering psychological safety. When your staff is exhausted, traumatized, and working under unbelievable pressure, they absolutely need to know they can speak hard truths to leadership without fear of retaliation. If the field can't be honest about a failing strategy, the whole system just collapses.
And that leadership style feeds straight into a relentless operational rhythm. Plan, deliver, monitor, and learn and adapt. During a sudden emergency, say a massive earthquake, ground realities change by the minute. Actually, scratch that, by the second. A supply route that's wide open today might be totally blocked tomorrow. So this continuous cycle has to be agile enough to pivot instantly when new info comes in, but rigorous enough to stop people from duplicating efforts. It's a constant, unyielding loop of adapting to the evidence.
Finally, Part 5, Converting Authority into Impact, the ultimate goal of all of this.
At the end of the day, none of this architecture or strategy matters if it doesn't yield tangible results. Success for this director isn't about printing more reports or holding more meetings in Geneva. It is highly measurable impact on the ground. You have to ask, have they actually created clearer choices and priorities? Are country operations getting faster support? Is the interagency response actually coherent? And are the information products they put out implicitly trusted by decision makers? If they hit those targets, they've successfully implemented that humanitarian reset we talked about, and they've built real trust.
Which brings us right back to the ethical and operational foundation of this entire explainer. Why does all of this incredibly complex coordination matter? Because the fundamental mission is to keep the system entirely focused on the rights of people affected by a crisis, rather than getting obsessed with headquarters processes. It is so easy for huge institutions to get bogged down in their own bureaucratic machinery. The true bottom-line value of this director role is keeping the spotlight relentlessly focused on reducing human suffering.
So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought, especially for those of you out there aspiring to leadership roles. Reflect on the immense, heavy weight of this mandate. How will you bridge lofty global policy with gritty field reality to actually impact people in need? It's a huge question. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the blueprint of humanitarian leadership. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.